Last night was the highly anticipated and long overdue rematch between two legendary media frenemies, liberal comedian Jon Stewart and former Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, on the most recent episode of Jon Stewart's Daily Show. And though the entire conversation was wildly entertaining, at the very end, O'Reilly was predictably humiliated, not just by Stewart, but also himself, and it was glorious to behold. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. When I first read that Bill O'Reilly would be coming back to the Daily Show, I really was interested because, whether you like it or not, the two of them have a really interesting chemistry. So when Stewart was the host of the Daily Show before he passed the torch to Trevor Noah, he and O'Reilly were like longtime frenemies. They constantly debated and argued with one another. O'Reilly would appear on The Daily Show, Stewart would go to Fox News, and it was a major media frenemy relationship, and they had, again, an interesting dynamic. Now, I think this is the first time in about 10 years that they faced off against each other, and obviously this is the post-Trump world, right? That was before Donald Trump became president of the United States, and O'Reilly is no longer on Fox News. So I was curious to see how this rematch would go, and the chemistry is still there between them, and Stewart's very patient, and the whole conversation is something worth watching. But at the very end, the topic turned, of course, to President Biden, and Bill O'Reilly tried to blame President Biden for basically everything wrong in the world. And then Jon Stewart asked a very simple question, and Bill O'Reilly face-planted, and we've got to talk about it. So here's the clip, and we'll unpack it together.
I mean,
that's how bad Biden has been for the country.
Well, I disagree with that, but that's
of course you do, but that's okay.
Well, I understand that.
I can back it up. Do you want me to?
Okay, I mean,
I'm going to ruin your day. I'm going to ruin your day, Stewart.
You brought a handkerchief? All right.
I was prepared for this. Food prices under Biden up 20%. Gas prices 38%.
Yeah.
Mortgage rates 160%.
Yeah, prices are going up.
Drug ODs up 36%. Okay? Car insurance 125% up. Right. These are folks. They have to spend that money.
Listen, there's no question that post-pandemic, this country and the world have suffered from
Trump had 2 years of post-pandemic.
Right, but Trump ran an $8 trillion deficit. He spent $1.7 trillion on tax cuts. He deregulated
inflation
industry.
Was 1.5% when he walked out the door.
Right, but look at it in relation to the world. I respectfully say, yes, inflation was too high, and that hurts American consumers.
You want this?
So what did Biden do to create that, though?
I don't know, and that's what I would have asked him.
So that is right-wing commentary in a nutshell. It really is. What that means is you blame a Democratic president for literally everything going on in the world. It could be global inflation. It could be interest rates, which are set by the Fed. It could be corporate greed. You blame the Democratic president for everything. You give them credit for nothing. And then when you're asked, okay, what did the Democratic president do to create these awful circumstances? You say, I don't know. They were just president. And so that's why Stewart reacted the way he did, getting up, laughing, and the audience laughing as well, because he's like, this is it. It's just simple, pointing fingers of correlation. Now, it would be one thing if conservatives were consistent, right? If conservatives would accept that when bad things occur under a Republican president, that they would blame the Republican president for that. But they don't do that. Off the top of my head, I was thinking, O'Reilly talking about interest rates. Interest rates in Florida are nationally uniquely high. And Ron DeSantis, whom I imagine Bill O'Reilly quite loves, given that he's the conservative gubernatorial darling, he's the leader of Florida. But would Bill O'Reilly blame Ron DeSantis for uniquely, enormously high interest rates in Florida? I don't know. I doubt it. And I imagine he wouldn't be consistent on that score. Gas prices, we've talked about this. How does the president of the United States, any president, control gas prices? If that were true, wouldn't President Biden be waving a magic wand or pulling the lever to reduce gas prices? Presumably, he wants people to like him. Presumably, since he's running for re-election, he wants to win. Why wouldn't he just tug the lever and drop gas prices down to $1 or 50 cents? Perhaps the president, Republican or Democrat, don't actually directly control gas prices. Maybe that's the theory. And perhaps inflation, again, which was caused in large part due to the pandemic, which is why we saw stratospheric global inflation, not just in the United States, but in Japan, in the United Kingdom, which has been under conservative leadership for 14 years. This is the thing. This is why I think it's important that when people want to talk about the dire straits of the economy, and there are some areas in which the economy is still quite bad, including high prices. But overall, the macroeconomic metrics, as we've talked about time and time again, are actually pretty damn good, which is part of the reason why Donald Trump constantly tries to take credit for President Biden's economy. So what this illustrates is, again, the double standard. And Jon Stewart, again, he pointed out, well, listen, you're conservative. You complain about the debt and deficit. Donald Trump deficit spent for 4 years, even prior to the pandemic. He added twice as much to the national debt as President Biden, all in a single 4-year term. And Trump was the guy who promised to get rid of the national debt. Not only would he not add any to it, he would wipe out the debt he inherited. But O'Reilly doesn't care about any of that. I'll also point out, since this was a development from the past 48 hours, yet again, the S&P, the stock market, closed at record highs. It's like the 39th time under President Biden.
Dow closes at a record, up 726 points. S&P, that's a record as well. S&P, that makes it the 39th record close of 2024. That'll do it for
the 39th time just this year in 2024. Is Bill O'Reilly talking about that? Would he give President Biden credit for that? No, this is what they do. It's a constant shifting of the goalposts. Democratic presidents are responsible for everything wrong. Republican presidents are responsible for nothing that goes wrong on their watch. And Jon Stewart is right to greet this with incredulity and laughter. Super ridiculous stuff from Bill O'Reilly. And it was so funny to see him faceplant. Okay, well, if this is the case, what did Biden actually do to make these bad things happen? I don't know. I love that. I love how he just faceplants because he doesn't have the answers. Now, with all this in mind, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of pivot to what the future may potentially portend. What might be in the future? Prior to the failed assassination attempt on Donald Trump, President Biden was giving speeches and increasing his direct rhetoric. Okay, he was calling out Donald Trump for what he is, which is a threat to democracy, which he remains. Also, an adjudicated fraudster, an adjudicated rapist. All of these things are true. But one of the things that President Biden did in the day prior to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump is he actually, for the first time, laid out in specific, stark terms the agenda of his first 100 days, what he wants to do: restore Roe v. Wade with federal legislation, expand Social Security and Medicare, wipe out all medical debt, raise the minimum wage, end union busting, ban assault weapons, including the sort of weapons that were used by a registered Republican against Donald Trump, and make the child tax credit permanent, the enhanced child tax credit, I might add, which cut child poverty in half. So I want to play some of this from President Biden's speech because we didn't get a chance to talk about it given the developments of the assassination attempt and then the Republican National Convention. So we'll play some of this and unpack it together.
So today I'm going to start by laying out the first 100 days of my second term. And here it is. The first bill I'm going to introduce will restore Roe v. Wade to make it the law of the land. I will sign the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. And we're not only going to stop Trump and the MAGA Republicans from cutting Social Security and Medicare, we'll expand and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. And here's how we're going to do it. Press always asks how. Listen, press, by making the rich pay their fair share of Social Security. And we're going to end medical debt. By that I mean we've already made sure medical debt can no longer be put on your credit report. You can wipe out medical debt for pennies on the dollar. We're going to raise the federal minimum wage. We're going to pass the PRO Act, ending union busting once and for all. And I'm going to ban assault weapons again. I did it once, I'm going to do it again. We're going to keep leading the world. We are on climate and clean energy. When I signed the American Rescue Plan, The law expanded child care tax credit to cut child poverty in half in America, and it did. Republicans let it expire. I'm going to make child care tax cut permanent. And by the way,
So all of this is really, really good. I mean, it really is. The enhanced child tax credit, for example, he's right. This was an American Rescue Plan provision. Okay, so it was Democrats who were responsible for it. But there was a sunset provision, right? Especially it was imposed by conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin, for example. And when the time came to renew the child tax credit, not only did Joe Manchin, one Democrat vote against it, every Republican in the Senate, all 50, including the reasonable ones like Mitt Romney. And as a consequence, child poverty, which had been cut in half by President Biden and the Democrats' enhanced child tax credit, that child poverty started to increase again. And then Fox News and right-wingers had the temerity to try to blame that on President Biden. You see, this is what Republicans do. They make a mess or allow a mess to be created, and they don't want to help Democrats clean it up because they want to use it as a wedge issue for the next election cycle. It's a very cynical, disgusting ploy. But obviously, so much of this is contingent not just on President Biden or the Democratic presidential nominee winning the White House, but also by the rest of us delivering that president a sufficiently liberal, sufficiently progressive majority in both chambers of Congress. You got to have the House back. You have to have the Senate. We have to have a trifecta. That's the sad thing, folks. Because Republicans behave in bad faith, because Republican politicians are totally disinterested in governing, because they are like, it's like a three-legged race. This is the comparison I use so often. Governing with Republicans is like being in a three-legged race where your partner just drops to the ground and hugs your leg and tries to impede you moving forward. That's the Republicans. They still have a responsibility to govern. They are given and should be given no constitutional, civic, or moral exemption from governing. Even if they have sincere disagreements, we can litigate those. But to just thwart progress, that's what they do. So it's not enough for Biden or the Democrats to take the White House. We have to give them the whole thing. Even codifying road protections, folks. We can do that, right? It passed in the House under President Biden in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. We got it in the House and Biden was prepared to sign it into law. But you need a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate or a sufficient number of Democratic senators who are willing to break the filibuster, which Joe Manchin was not. So we have to win, folks. We have to win the whole thing. This is an affirmative progressive agenda, which will mean enormously. It will make a meaningful difference to working class Americans, not just in blue states, but in red states, who are ironically represented by people who oppose that very agenda. Red states are represented by people in the Congress that want to cut taxes for the rich and make it harder for poor and middle class people. So anyway, I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition comparing to, Bill O'Reilly wanting to blame everything bad in the world under President Biden, but not being able to answer why that's the case, and contrasting it with what President Biden and the Democrats want to do if they win the upcoming election. Food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comments.